going on, FA Nation? Welcome back. This is the Fantasy Alarm NASCAR DFS podcast. It is Saturday, March 11th. Matt and I are here to preview Sunday's NASCAR Cup Series race from Phoenix. Matt, we just finished up with qualifying. Practice was yesterday. They were allowed to work on the cars overnight. How you doing? I feel like we do have quite a bit to get to and talk about.
I'm doing well, as rested as I can be after a 1,200-mile drive back to my parents' house in VA. Made it in time to watch qualifying, and I tried to scour for practice. Fox apparently does not have that as an on-demand thing on their app or their site. YouTube couldn't be of service either, so I was able to follow Twitter for what was happening. They obviously discussed it some on qualifying coverage. So I'm pretty well versed in, what happened in practice, who was good, who wasn't good, who needed help and whatnot. But the theme of the day is that the cars are tough to drive for a Cup Series. Like, it's impressive how tough those cars are. So that should make the racing on Sunday all that more impressive and more entertaining, a little bit more wild than we normally have seen Phoenix be over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I remember I was listening to, I forget what podcast it was. It may have been Denny Hamlin's, but a couple of the drivers, that did the test. I think it was back in January. I think Christopher Bell was there, maybe Joey Logano. They said that 30% less downforce. It just makes the car, I guess their words were, more racy. And so, which is good because this package or this next gen car with the old package on short flat tracks last year was awful. Couldn't pass. The first Martinsville race was a nightmare. It was a bit of a snooze fest. And I think, coming off a week like last week where a lot of people didn't enjoy that kind of racing just because it was dominated by Byron and then to a secondary extent, Larson. I think it's shaping up to be a very fun weekend for NASCAR with a brand new package, and hopefully we see better racing on this type of track.
Yeah, I agree. They had to do something with the shorter, flatter tracks because, like you said, the racing was terrible. New Hampshire last year was okay, but that was about the only one. Obviously, the second Martinsville race, we all know it was famous for the Chastain insane move at the end to make the championship, which is now illegal. But aside from that, there wasn't a whole lot of actual action happening on track. So, and then, they got to Phoenix last year for the championship, and it was basically locked up. Like, whichever of the championship four out-qualified the others, we basically knew was going to have the advantage throughout the race. So we'll see. It was very impressive to see the tire fall off during practice in this less downforce. It was very fun to see them get loose in qualifying. I mean, Kyle Larson still won the pole, but got real loose coming around turn 4 in that final qualifying lap. Took 0.3 of a second off of his first run in qualifying between the pole run and the first run. So tire fall off. We all love that. We all love it when these guys are out there really wheeling these things around. So what does that mean for DFS, though? It means we could see a little bit of chaos. Like, I heard multiple drivers during qualifying say that turn 1 and 2 were real iffy. Like, not a lot of grip. They were all getting pretty loose. We saw Bubba Wallace. That car, I have no idea how he made it all the way around the track. Like, he put it into the wall, and then it got loose 3 more times. I don't know.
They interviewed him, I think, during or after practice, and they're like, what do you need to do to make the car better? And to his credit, he was very friendly and jovial about it. He's just like, we don't even know.
Yeah, he's like, I have no idea. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It looked like it was on rollers. It looked like the wheels were on roller skates on his car. Like it was not. There was no grip. That being said, I do have faith that Toyotas will figure it out, and they'll actually be able to wheel them. So, I think we've got an actual race here. I think there's fast cars in every camp. And I think we're going to see some really fun action come Sunday. And I think there's a bunch of ways we could build the lineups for DFS.
Awesome. Before we dive into strategy, drivers, contest selection, just give us the breakdown of Phoenix Raceway.
So it's a flat 1 mile track. The steepest banking on the track is 12 degrees. I believe that's up by the fans in the start finish line. That's banked about 12 degrees. Um, there's also the dog leg for those of you that have been, that might be new for DFS this year and have been watching practice and qualifying. The really wide corner after the start finish line is the dog leg, and you'll see on restarts, it gets about 7 or 8 cars wide. Everybody dives from wall to wall to try to get spots on the track and really cut down the corner. Now during the race, you're not going to see a whole lot of guys doing that on the regular, but in order to pass, you're going to see a bunch of passing happen in that dog leg part of the track. Um, and it's in the past, it has been a track position track. Out of the last 10 races here, the farthest back a winner has come from is 13th. Everybody else has started in the top 10. I don't necessarily know that that's going to be the case this weekend. I think there's a chance for somebody starting further back to take advantage of some chaos, but in general, the guys who are starting in the top 10 have all proven to be fast in practice and qualifying. So we might see some shifting there, but I don't know. It's generally a track position track. Oh, and the number for this race is kilometers. So the United Rentals Work United 500 is 500 kilometers. So that equals 312 laps around the 1 mile track, because 312 laps of a mile is 312 miles, and that equals 500 kilometers.
I'm glad you bring up track position because this was something that I tried to hammer home with my Xfinity playbook. We've said this before numerous times on shorter flat tracks, mostly just the short tracks. Numerous guys will fall off the lead lap. It will happen quickly if there's a long green flag run. Basically, the longer that this race stays clean, and if we get long green flag runs, multiple drivers are going to fall laps down. They're going to lose multiple laps. Basically, the key, if you're starting a back marker and just trying to find someone to get you value, you're basically hoping for a few cautions just to keep them on the lead lap or at least one lap down.
Yeah.
But so for me, I approach this race the way I would a road course, and in that I will take the PD where if it's given to me. So, for example, the Xfinity race, Kyle Busch is starting at the rear, didn't even post a qualifying lap. Brandon Jones had a bad lap. I think he just missed a turn, or it just qualified outside the top 20 in a really good car. So in those two cases, I will take those guys because I know that they have the equipment to move up through the field and stay on the lead lap and just pay off their price tag through PD and a good finish. I don't feel as good playing value plays that are basically starting outside the top 25. Ty Dillon has been bad all year, but this is a situation where it's like he's $5,000. He's starting 35th. That's not exactly the guy that I want to punt to because there's just I'm not expecting much from a $5,000 driver, but I know that the ceiling and the floor are both probably very low. If I'm going to go to a value play, I love looking at a driver like, Chris Buescher, Justin Haley, or AJ Allmendinger. Respectively, they're starting 21st, 26th, and 22nd. Those are guys that can at least move up into the top 20, maybe even the top 15, and stay on the lead lap and have a good finish. And if you stay on the lead lap while others fall off the lead lap, then that kind of just secures their position the rest of the race as long as they don't wreck. So normally on certain weeks, we have no problem saying, go ahead and look at these guys that are value plays. They're cheap, and maybe if they move up 5 to 10 spots, they can pay off. This is a week where I'm less inclined to do that. This track, Richmond, Martinsville, and New Hampshire, because I really want to make sure I can get. I really like these tracks for tournaments. I suck at these tracks for cash games. So I really just want, even with my value plays, I want those guys to be able to finish in the top 20.
Yep, I agree with that take. A guy that I'm looking at is Eric Almirola, starting 31st, but he has the skill in the car to move up.
Yeah.
So I'm not as concerned with that as, say, a Ty Dillon or even a Gilliland starting 29th. or heck, even a LaJoy starting 28th, I'm not 100% sold on. So, your point is very well taken that it's we've got to treat this kind of as a mix of road course and short track, right? Because short tracks, you're targeting guys going to the front for lap sled. Road courses, you're not targeting lap sled because there's not enough of them. But at Phoenix, there's 312 laps. There's going to be dominator points. We need to get at least one guy, if not two, in our builds. But then in terms of position differential, road courses and short tracks are basically the same. You have to cap it at some point moving back in the pack, knowing that guys aren't going to be able to move up all that far once things get going in the race like they would in an intermediate or super speedway or whatnot. So in that regard, there are a few that kind of shifts the board a little bit as to who we're looking at. There's probably going to be, I can't decide if Michael McDowell is going to be popular or not starting 7th at his home track. Pretty cheap on both sites.
It's going to be a no for me.
Yeah, I'm willing to take a shot in the hope that the adjustments they made between practice and qualifying stick. Because, like, normally if we were looking at practice times and you're like, oh, that guy's super slow, and then he qualifies super well, you're like, well, maybe he just got one good lap. But here's the thing. This weekend, practiced on Friday at a completely different temperature than they ran qualifying, which is going to be closer to race conditions in terms of timing because practice was way later in the day, so it was cooler. And they were able to work on the cars in between practice and qualifying. Normally, they're not allowed to do that. Normally, it's an impound situation. You practice, qualify, you leave the car, you're racing as it was at the end of qualifying. So that, to me, gives a little bit of wiggle room to see if McDowell will hold. I'm not saying, like, load up on him, but I think in GPPs, he's worth a shot as a guy who costs you basically nothing.
So on that topic, if you're, and we'll get back on track shortly, but like you look at guys that are priced around him, Harrison Burton's 5,700 starting 27th, LaJoy's 56 starting 28th. Pretty much everyone that's priced around him is starting outside the top 25.
Right.
And as we were just talking about, like, these are guys that many of them will fall off the lead lap and they just won't be able to cap their upside. What's interesting about McDowell is that he already has the starting position and shouldn't lose a lap in the first stage. The problem is that I'd feel better about McDowell if he was maybe starting between 12th and 15th because he's starting 7th, which basically means if he finishes 12th, even with 12th, and assuming he doesn't get any dominator points, I don't think he's going to. He's not going to hit value. But again, if he finishes 12th, he'd still be getting you 26 points on DraftKings, which not terrible from a $5,400 driver.
Nearly 5.
But if it gets worse from there, then it's a real issue. So, like, I understand, possibly playing him. And there is an argument to be made because ownership will be very low. It's not going to take very much to get leverage. He's going to be a sub 10% played driver, and all you need is like 15%, 3 out of 20 lineups, and you have leverage over the field.
And if he finishes where he starts, then you get value. But there is risk. I'm not saying it's a.
If he finishes where he starts, that's insane value.
Yeah, because he'd get 37 points on DK without any dominator points.
Right.
And then we're talking, 7x or so?
Just about.
So, yeah, that's, there's upside, but the downside is that he could just go backwards and free fall and cost you. But it's this is part of that interesting strategy where you go, normally I wouldn't play a guy starting there, but I don't know.
I mean, what I will say is, like, what's nice about the Xfinity race is that a lot of these super cheap drivers, like the guys in the 6Ks, and then there were a couple of like 5K and 4K drivers, they're all starting There are a few of them that are starting inside the top 20, and then some that are starting inside the top 25. So it actually that's how I like qualifying in the starting order to shape up. I have cheap drivers that I'm playing, and I'm just hoping they stay on the lead lap. The problem with the Cup race right now is like the way we're phrasing this conversation. McDowell is looking like an okay tournament play. Corey LaJoie has been a top 20 driver for the first few weeks, but there is still a part of me that worries that he just can't stay on the lead lap in this race and he finishes outside the top 25. And I do expect ownership to be elevated on LaJoie, given what he's done so far this year.
Yeah, I would actually say that a guy that could be lower owned is just above him in Harrison Burton, who I actually have faith could finish top 20.
Is it because of the Penske affiliation?
I mean, he showed that car got really good over the long run in practice.
Just not much fall off.
Not really. If you look at his 5-lap average, put him. The 10-lap average puts him 15th in the field. His 5-lap average is 13th in the field. His 15-lap average is 9th in the field, and his 20-lap average is 13th in the field. So it's not bad.
In comparison to where he's starting, especially.
He has shown some decent speed and I know there's no other track that compares. This is also a new package, whatnot. But he has shown some decent speed this year when given the shot, and he pulled off a top 20 here last year. So, right. There is that. I think. How high do you think Larson's going to be on?
Oh boy. See, here's the thing with Larson is so you heard about the NASCAR confiscating.
Yes.
AP. I don't know the full story about it because I didn't see qualifying, and I just started seeing things about it on Twitter earlier today. But I love when things like this happen with Hendrick, because this isn't the first time it's happened.
No.
But either way, those drivers will still go out, especially Larson. And he's like, he even says, I don't even know what that thing does. And he still goes out and he puts down the fastest lap in qualifying.
I mean, think about Harvick with the windshield or the rear window a few years ago when people caught him with the bending rear windshield, and NASCAR took it and fined him massively and said, you have to use this. And then he went out and won and pointed to the back windshield when he was doing burnouts. This didn't matter. It was me. I don't know. They took the part, and then he went out and ran a qualifying lap that was 0.2 faster than anybody else. Insane. 9 of the top 10 in their first qualifying runs qualified within 1/10 of a second, and Larson was 0.2 faster than anybody else. If the only way he has an issue is if it gets too loose and he pulls a Kyle Larson thing where he just dirts it into the wall.
I will say, I saw a tweet earlier this week where it said, in terms of win equity, a majority of the wins come from inside the top 8 here, and then the number even improved, from inside the top 4. But even, just pure, from a DFS perspective, it's so easy to accumulate dominator points from the pole position. And I think that everyone can just see that. All you have to do is just go onto Racing Reference and just look at how the last handful of Phoenix races have gone about. It's really not hard for him to go out and get at least 30 dominator points, and if he finishes well, he's going to be in the optimal lineup. For that reason, I imagine he should probably be about 40% owned in cash games, I would say, but I think in tournaments he might be something more like 35.
You don't think it goes up for tournaments?
Not necessarily, no. I think people will spread their exposure around.
Fair enough. I mean, I can't disagree with that, but I mean, I might put him a little higher across the board. He had the fastest everything in practice, and then had the fastest laps in qualifying.
That's what worries me, though, is that, and I try not to get in my own head about this, but it's anytime there's a guy that just kills it in practice, he kills it in qualifying, something goes wrong in the race.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it. We've seen it specifically with Larson.
Yeah.
before. Like, he was fast here last year and the engine blew. Right? Like, he's been fast at Texas and he catches fire. And he was fast at did he have an issue or an issue earlier this year? He was fast and something else happened.
I think he was fast at Auto Club, and then he had a electrical issue, and he basically lost laps, but he had a rocket ship the rest of the race. So he was running laps
like
down,
14 laps down or something,
and he was still collecting fastest laps.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. So I'm with you there, but there's a bunch of different ways we can. I think there's some surprising picks you'll see in the playbook that will be out not much longer after this podcast comes out.
Can I ask you a question? In general, because I want to talk about the Fords, because every bit of research I've done, whether it's through podcast, just following along through Twitter throughout the week, everybody is high on Fords, especially the SHR Fords. So my question is kind of like for each team. One, are you buying into the hype for the SHR cars? And two, do you think that this could be a rebound week for Penske?
I think I feel more confident in SHR than I do in Penske.
Okay.
Couple reasons. One, I've seen the building speed in SHR the last couple of weeks. Granted, different package, different track type, whatnot, but you want to see a trend. You want to see them moving in the right direction. And then they came out. This is a very good track for Almirola. It's a very good track for Kevin Harvick. It's been a good track. Chase Briscoe won this race last year. As for Team Penske, the books were high as hell on Team Penske. Like, FanDuel's top 10 odds earlier this week had both Blaney and Logano at minus 850 for a top 10 finish. Minus 850, which is like a 90% chance of finishing in the top 10 if you do the implied odds from that. It also means you have to bet an absolute metric crap ton of money to actually win anything, which always turns me off from betting those things. But it just seems like something, and I can't really say Kyle Petty's comments about Ryan Blaney were all that incorrect.
No, they were pretty accurate.
I think it's a pretty good comp to Casey Kane, where he was this wonder kid that came up and did well to begin with, and then we all spent the rest of his time waiting for him to show up with the skills. Like, and it's not like Casey Kane was in a bad car in his career. He was in Hendrick cars that everybody else was winning in. Mm-hmm. Ryan Blaney. He's in a Penske car that literally won the Daytona 500, and then his teammate won the championship. Right? Like, so I don't know if that's going to light a fire under Ryan Blaney. I think he's a pretty chill dude. I'm not sure anything really lights a fire under Ryan Blaney at this point. But I'm a little more sketch about Team Penske because Austin Cindric, in fairness, hasn't really shown all that much since the Daytona 500 win. Ryan Blaney's always a dude with speed, but can't seem to really capitalize on it. And Logano, for most of last year, wasn't all that dominant. He was just kind of running top 5 every week, which is great, but like, he's not out there dominating. So I feel like I have more faith right now in SHR than Team Penske.
All right. Are there any other drivers that we maybe want to talk about? We can save them for the playbook, and we can just kind of discuss contest strategy.
Why don't we save them for the playbook? I have a few guys that are intriguing in the playbook.
Okay.
For sure. But yeah, contest, like, you're playing mostly GPPs this week, right?
So I only have the Chrome Horn reserved. Even last week was weird because I had a very profitable week. I built 10 lineups. I had them all set for the Chrome Horn and in my 3-entry and single entry contests. And then with 2 hours to go before the race, I was just like, I think this is it. I don't want to, I love these 10 lineups. I don't think I need it anymore. So I didn't even max enter the Chrome Horn last week, but still had profit. Currently, I have 20 entries in the Chrome Horn. Yeah, I don't know, because I don't feel as confident as I did last week for Vegas, and it's just because it's the new package, the new aero package for this track. So it's almost like, do I want to just, play $80 in the Chrome Horn and then maybe, save bankroll, not necessarily for next week at Atlanta, but maybe Coda after that. Maybe I'll do some like very smaller, like low cost 3 entry max contests and a couple of cheaper single entries. But I think I might be okay if I just do the Chrome Horn for tomorrow and just see if my research and analysis and reads for this race, see if it's on, and then I'd be just content, just only playing the Chrome Horn.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I'm doing more GPPs this week rather than, and it's not because I can't read cash here. I think I have a pretty good read uh, on this race from doing the research throughout the week, watching, you know, the notes from practice, watching qualifying, hearing what all the drivers are saying about the new um, package and what we can expect and stuff like that. But it's more so in line with you that there's this air of unknownness, if I can say it that way, about this package, right? Like if we're watching practice and qualifying, a bunch of dudes were loose. Some dudes were tight and then they swung it just a little bit and then they were really loose. Um, Tire fall off is going to be a thing. I think it's going to be a completely different strategy race for the pits for this Phoenix race than we typically see here, which is going to shift some stuff. So I'm with you. I'd rather play a little lighter this week in GPPs, um, and see if what we can't learn from it that we can then take to other tracks that'll have this package, like Richmond and New Hampshire and probably Gateway, I would assume, and similar tracks to Phoenix. Um, that's not to say I'm not playing cash. Um, but I think there's a little bit more creativity you can put into your builds and GPPs this week without having to sell out for, a Larson and then, several PD plays.
Do we want to just give a quick note on next week's podcast since it is Atlanta?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good idea. So, for those that don't know, Atlanta is mostly kind of like a mile and a half super speedway now. Like,
Drafting.
yeah, they run the same package that they do at Daytona and Talladega, um, at Atlanta. So, with that being said, look, the first race there last year was an absolute chaotic mess. Like, it was almost an abomination to watch, to be honest. Um, and the second race, we had laps led dominators, and then we also had some chaos. So, with that being said, we're going to treat it like a Daytona or a Talladega, and we're going to record a midweek podcast. A couple of reasons. One, it's running the same package. We can expect chaos yet again. And two, schedule wise, it just works better for us. Dan is actually going to the Truck and Xfinity races next weekend at Atlanta on Saturday. And I am driving back from Virginia back to Nebraska starting Friday evening, and I'm not going to get back until Saturday evening. So there'd be no way for me to do that drive and then hop on a pod and edit it and get it up in any reasonable time. So we're going to do it on a Wednesday. What was that, Dan?
I said you don't want a podcast while driving?
No, I mean, my lovely kids are in the back. We came with our cat this time because we have to give him medicine and didn't want to fork over $500 to the vet to do it. So my cat would be meowing in the background, and it'd be pure chaos to record in the car. So yeah, it'll be a Wednesday pod. Probably out Thursday morning. The only ones that are going to be like that are the ones that are at places like Talladega and Daytona and the Atlanta races. Everything else will be Saturday races. And then for the content, I think Dan and I are going to split the playbook duties for the Cup playbook next week. So I will have some plays written up probably before practice and qualifying. Send them over to Dan. Dan will add his 2 cents and a bunch of drivers to the playbook once he gets back from seeing on-track festivities, and then we'll have it all up for you. So that's the lay of the land for Atlanta.
All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoy your time with your family. Best of luck to you this weekend, and best of luck to the FA Nation.
Best of luck, FA Nation.